Most gardeners today are, well, obsessed with biochar. They spend money buying bags of it, charging it with compost tea and mixing it into their beds because they've heard it's the ultimate soil amendment. But here's the strange thing. Long before biochar became trendy, gardeners were using something far simpler that often worked even better in certain situations: wood ash. And here's the mistake that's hurting a lot of gardens right now. People either ignore wood ash completely or they dump it into the soil in huge amounts thinking it's harmless because it's natural. Both approaches can cause real problems. Too little and you miss out on one of the easiest nutrient boosts available. Too much and you can push your soil pH so high that plants stop absorbing nutrients entirely. That leads to yellow leaves, weak growth and poor harvests even when your beds look rich. This is exactly why I started testing soil conditions instead of just guessing. One simple tool that's been extremely useful is the 4-in-1 soil moisture meter that measures moisture, pH, temperature and sunlight. When you start adding materials like wood ash to soil, pH can shift quickly, and that little meter lets you catch problems before your plants start suffering. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. Because when wood ash is used correctly, the results can be surprisingly powerful. And the technique I'm about to show you is something many gardeners learned from their grandparents long before modern soil amendments existed. Most gardeners misunderstand what wood ash actually does to soil. Wood ash isn't just leftover fireplace dust. It's essentially concentrated plant minerals. When wood burns, the carbon burns away and leaves behind the mineral nutrients that the tree absorbed during its life. That includes potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and trace minerals that plants need to grow. But potassium is the real star here. Potassium controls fruit development, disease resistance, and water regulation inside plants. Tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, beans, and squash all use massive amounts of it during the growing season. That's why wood ash has historically been called potash. In fact, before synthetic fertilizers existed, farmers literally leached potassium from wood ash to fertilize crops. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike many fertilizers that release nutrients slowly, wood ash dissolves quickly in soil moisture, which means plants can access those minerals almost immediately. That's exactly why Grandma's trick works so well. Here's the simple trick that honestly boosted harvests for generations. The traditional method was never to just dump ash across the entire garden. Instead, gardeners applied very small amounts directly around heavy-feeding plants. I tested this approach with tomatoes and potatoes in raised beds. Around each plant, I sprinkled roughly 1 tablespoon of fine wood ash in a circle about 6 inches from the stem, then lightly watered it in. Within about 2 weeks, the difference was noticeable. The plants developed darker leaves, thicker stems, and just more vigorous growth compared to untreated plants. By mid-season, the tomato plants that received wood ash produced noticeably larger fruit clusters. The potatoes formed larger tubers as well. But there's a reason this trick works so well, and also why it can backfire if used incorrectly. So, why can wood ash outperform biochar in some gardens? Well, biochar is essentially charcoal designed to improve soil structure. It's fantastic for long-term soil health, but honestly, it works slowly. Biochar acts more like a sponge that holds nutrients rather than providing them immediately. Wood ash is the opposite. It's fast-acting. Because those minerals are already in a soluble form, they dissolve quickly and feed plants almost immediately. That's why gardeners historically used ash in spring planting. It provided a quick mineral boost exactly when crops were establishing strong root systems. In one of my test beds, I compared 3 treatments: biochar alone, wood ash alone, and a control bed with neither. During the first growing season, the wood ash plants clearly outperformed the others in early growth and fruit production. The biochar bed caught up later in the season, but that early boost from ash made a noticeable difference in yields. And that leads to an important lesson. These materials serve different purposes, but if you want fast mineral availability, wood ash often wins. The mistake that ruins gardens when using wood ash. Here's where many gardeners get into trouble. Wood ash is alkaline, very alkaline. Adding too much can raise soil pH quickly, especially in small raised beds or containers. Most vegetables grow best in soil between pH 6.0 and 7.0. When pH climbs above that range, certain nutrients like iron and manganese become difficult for plants to absorb. That's when leaves start turning pale yellow, even though nutrients are technically present in the soil. I've seen gardeners spread entire buckets of ash over their beds in one afternoon. Within weeks, their plants started showing severe nutrient deficiencies. The soil chemistry had shifted too far. That's why measuring soil pH matters so much when using ash. Even a small pH change can affect plant health dramatically. The right way to apply wood ash in a food garden. Over the years, I've found that moderation makes all the difference. For raised beds, a safe guideline is roughly 1 cup of wood ash per 10 square feet of garden space, and even that should be spread lightly and watered in well. When applying around individual plants, small amounts are best. A tablespoon per plant is usually plenty. Another trick that works well is mixing ash into compost before applying it to beds. The compost helps buffer the alkalinity while microbes distribute the minerals more evenly. This prevents those concentrated pH spikes that sometimes happen when ash sits directly against roots. And always avoid using ash from treated or painted wood. Only clean hardwood ash should go into food gardens. The surprising pest control benefit most gardeners overlook. Here's something many modern gardeners don't realize. Wood ash can also act as a mild pest deterrent. Its fine, powdery texture irritates soft-bodied insects like slugs and certain caterpillars. When sprinkled lightly around plants, ash creates a barrier that these pests tend to avoid. I've used this around lettuce beds during wet seasons when slugs become a serious problem. It's not a perfect solution, but it definitely reduces damage. The key is keeping the ash dry, because once rain hits it, the barrier effect disappears. Still, it's a useful bonus benefit from something many people throw away. The crops that benefit the most from wood ash. Not all plants respond the same way to wood ash. Vegetables that love potassium tend to respond best. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squash, beans, potatoes, and garlic often show noticeable improvements. Root crops like carrots and beets can benefit too, but only when ash is applied lightly. But there are some plants that prefer acidic soil and should rarely receive ash. Blueberries, strawberries, and potatoes grown in acidic soil conditions can struggle if pH rises too much. Understanding which crops prefer which soil conditions is one of the biggest advantages a gardener can develop. Because soil isn't just dirt. It's a complex chemical environment that plants interact with every day. The real reason this old gardening trick still works. What fascinates me about these traditional techniques is how often they align with modern soil science. Grandparents didn't necessarily talk about pH buffering, potassium availability, or microbial activity, but they observed results. They saw which practices improved yields and which ones didn't. Wood ash became a common garden amendment because it consistently improved plant performance when used carefully, and in many cases, it still does. But the difference today is that we can measure what's happening in the soil instead of relying purely on observation. That combination of traditional knowledge and modern tools is incredibly powerful because when you truly understand how soil chemistry affects plant growth, you stop guessing, you start making deliberate decisions that improve your garden season after season. Gardening becomes much more predictable when you pay attention to soil biology, mineral balance, and plant needs. Simple materials like wood ash, compost, and organic matter can transform a garden when they're used thoughtfully. But understanding when and how to apply them is what separates average gardens from highly productive ones. If you enjoy learning practical techniques backed by real testing in backyard gardens, raised beds, and hydroponic systems, make sure you subscribe to Farm Logic. And if you know a gardener who still throws away wood ash without realizing its potential, share this video with them, because sometimes the best garden solutions aren't new inventions at all. Sometimes they are the simple tricks that gardeners figured out generations ago.